to take it one step at a time. Let things be. It will unfold the way we need it to unfold as long as we keep our passions alive.
We have that power to stay open and to stay in the possibilities, but we have to face what's actually in front of us and know that we can do it.
It's like a surrendering into the unknown and knowing that whatever actions I take now will ripple out and kind of sow seeds for what it is in the future that wants to grow.
Welcome, dear friends. It's a joy to be sharing this space with you. One of the themes that comes up in this episode is about sharing your voice. I was swimming with a friend this week and we were talking about the fear that many have to express themselves and the feelings of worth, especially in the context of a podcast. These kinds of patterns around worth, confidence, and speaking clearly are ones that I've worked with a lot and also learned so much about myself after 20 years of public speaking and 7 of hosting this podcast. I find so often, even with guests that we have on this show, that nerves and insecurities can really come in the way of expressing that beautiful wisdom that we all want to hear. I have put together a set of 3 sessions to focus on this if you want to come into that space of your own inner confidence and voice and be free to share your wisdom and creativity. Head to our calendar or the show notes to find the link for this. Francis Weller says, "We've entered a collective initiatory process. We are calling it the long dark." He goes on to share, "I use the word long because it's going to be at least 2 generations, my friends. Most of us will not see the other side of the long dark. It's a time of descent in what the old alchemical tradition would call the nigredo, a time of dissolution, a time of collapse, a time of decay. Alchemy would tell us that this is an absolute necessity. They say soul work cannot begin without starting in the nigredo. In the nigredo, it is the end of constructs. Old structures begin to fall apart. We need systemic racism to fall apart. We need capitalism to fall apart. We need patriarchy to fall apart. There's so many things that have to break down right now. The truth is, we don't know what's going to happen. Nobody on the planet knows what's going to happen in the coming decades, much less the next few generations. But we have to operate under the possibility that something may sustain. This is not a time for heroism. It's a time for humility, deep listening, and patience. Our job is to find ways to participate in the long dark, in the breakdown, to not simply feel victimized by it or passively enduring it, to stop and to disengage from the manic productivity, the achievement focus, and spend some time in stillness is subversive. We are being ripened during this time to become a place of shimmering darkness, a point of combustion, of incandescence. Places of refugia are places of safety where life endures. This is a powerful metaphor for us, my friends. Places of safety where life endures. We must become that for one another. Part of our responsibility, our sole responsibility, is to throw as many seeds as possible into the darkness. And isn't darkness what the seeds require? We don't do this because we're guaranteed an outcome. We do it because it's our sole responsibility to nourish life, to feed life. That's our job. And with this framing of the long dark, we have a beautiful and powerful offering for you today from our team. You will hear from our beloved sound editor, Mary Chan, who has been tending to our sound since episode 29 and joins us from Victoria off the Pacific coast of Canada. And Lise van der Bouwhede, who is Belgian, currently living in community in Denmark. We met in India at Vandana Shiva's farm, where she was part of that episode. And then she joined the team on episode 220, writing the words that come with the podcast and curating the imagery. I joined from Devon in the UK, and we come together as the all-female team that make this podcast for you to share what's alive for us. In this conversation called Voices of Resilience, Embracing Uncertainty Together, we speak to the question, how do we find our way in the long dark? I hope you enjoy this and some kind of permission, wisdom, and nourishment lands for you in your body. Welcome to All That We Are, with me, your host, Amisha Tala Oak. On this show, we explore the weave between activism, the sacred, creativity, and regeneration, the spaces where our inner and outer worlds dance. From healing trauma to nature connection, to new technologies, to ancient wisdom, it's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a more beautiful future. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to listen, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing and envisioning, we create the futures of our wildest dreams, and we begin to embody all that we are becoming, and all that is possible. I am delighted to welcome both Mary and Lise to this episode, which is another beautiful team sharing. I would love first to ask you, Mary, as you've been part of this show for 5 or 6 years, what is alive for you right now with the question, what are the futures of your wildest dreams? And how does that relate to your journey at this time?
Today just marks a very uneasy day being in North America and having the new year and everything starting. It feels like I'm waiting for something massive to drop, yet what I'm telling myself is just take it one step at a time. Let things be. It will unfold the way we need it to unfold as long as we keep our passions alive and that we know what we want to do. And so working on this show for so long, I go through those cycles when we have our breaks. At the start of the breaks, it's like, oh yeah, I need time. And then when we come back, we're like, oh yes, these conversations are so needed. They are this beautiful moment and snapshot in time. There's always something that comes to the table for me at the forefront of my mind when I'm editing the show and listening to the conversation. And it just brings this positivity and this lightness where sometimes we can be in that darkness for so long, just stewing in our own minds of, oh no, what if this and what if that and what if that? But knowing, hey, there are other people in the world who are looking to make a change. They want to do better. And then taking those little bits and pieces into my own life to be like, okay, still following my passions, still loving working on the show and creating the little changes that I need to create in my own little part of the world can make a difference too. Just planting that seed in my mind and knowing that things are going to be okay.
Thank you, Mary. Liz, it's been such a joy to have you with us on this team for the last few months. And I wonder how that's been stirring you and your journey into this as well. What comes that you want to share around that?
Yeah, having had the chance to listen to so many people sharing what is the future of their wildest dreams, I always feel like, oh, yeah, that's also mine. But there are so many things that I feel, what is truly my future of my wildest dreams. And I think being in community and eating with people who know and cherish where the food comes from and what they are doing feels like true to them and their hearts, that's a place where I want to be. And I think that's a place also where I am right now. And somehow when I am in this place, I don't question much, and I'm not like dreaming of what is the future of my wildest dreams, because this is the future. Like this present moment is the future. Then I know that the journey that I'm on is just the right one. And that's just so beautiful to experience. Like when I'm saying it, I'm like, oh, I have goosebumps. Like it's like a cycle in a way that comes to an end. And I know that coming back to a place where I've been 3 years ago and now experiencing a similar thing, but very different in a way, gives me a lot of insights, but also realizing that I'm still maybe in the same place where I'm still sometimes scared to show up or step up or take initiative or share my voice. Or the future of my wildest dreams also includes a world where people can be themselves, can say what they want to say without having to question, like, is this right? Or can I say this? And I think for me, just showing up here also on this podcast is like a statement for myself, like, yeah, you can share your voice here. It doesn't need to be someone with a lot of followers or anybody can just say what's alive for them, share what's the future of their wildest dreams.
Beautiful. Yeah, I feel like when anyone connects really to their heart and shares from that place, then wisdom just is. We all learn so much from others, whether they're younger, older, different walks of life, same walks of life. It's that place that exists in us where we tap into something else that is so timeless and connected. I'm always so grateful that we have this opportunity through all that we are to experience so many different voices. And I've been really enjoying Timeless, our new episodes where we've been going back into the archives and listening again and bringing up something from a different time. And it's always really interesting because I'm like, oh, I remember me in that time. And some of it feels like, I've been like 17 different humans since that moment. And yeah, I always really enjoy like revisiting, and then like something else comes back online, because I feel like we grow in such an unlinear way. We forget things that we once knew and embodied. It's not like we just constantly kind of get more, and other people have meetings with other aspects of all the systemic issues that we're living in, and find that life is messier than that, and that we go through these different cycles. And for me, what really feels alive right now at this point of the beginnings of this year, really also feeling what we've been going through the last, 4-5 years, and, all throughout time, that there's so much that's shifting and evolving and dissolving and unclear. And it feels like it's a time that we're really being asked to be okay with uncertainty and be like resilient, but in this kind of, it's like in quite a light way, not like resilient, like, I am so strong, but in this kind of unguarded, like, yeah. And I can compost that part of myself and compost that idea of what may have been, and deal with this horrific thing that's happening in my neighborhood or in the world, and keep evolving into a more loving, present being. And I really feel like that's like all we can do. It's not easy, but I've really experienced it myself in the last years. But even recently, I often talk about these cycles of death and rebirth that we have. it's like they don't really make sense until you're experiencing them. And the death cycles, they just get so intense. And it's like, wow, like, am I ever going to find a way out of this? And then somehow we just do. And then we find ourselves in this different space, and we've sort of expanded to meet the moment. And I find that the more present I can be to what I'm feeling in the challenges and the difficulty, and the more that I'm really being with it, not being like, I don't want that, like that's too hard, I'm not looking at that, that's, the more that I really am with it, the more I feel like the love grow. And then when I come into one of those spaces where, my wings expand out again, and I feel that like expansive nature of humanness, which is, so amazing that exists, that is part of our natural cycles. In Sanskrit, there's a word spanda, which speaks to this kind of contracting, expanding that we're always doing. And obviously you can feel it with your breath. There's a contraction and expansion constantly. And when I get to those places where there's like the expanse, and it just is like, whoa, like how logic couldn't get us there, but somehow we do have these cycles. It's like you have this kind of wake up, opening, expansive moment. And then Sally Kempton, who was my dear teacher, and it was her birthday recently. And those of you that listen will know that she left her body a couple of years ago now, year and a half ago. She would say that then you go into this like honeymoon period, and you never know how long that will last. And then there's like the fall, and then it's like, death, and then like waking up again. And that actually you can have these cycles in a day. You can have like 7 of them, or you can get stuck in one part of it for quite some time. And then there's all of these different cycles overlapping. And it's really like not that simple. And I was talking to a really dear friend this week who is an incredible person that holds a lot of space for people, and kind of person that gets stopped in the street because people are like, oh, your work's really moved me. And she was saying about how hard like it is and it has been, and various things that have been happening in her life. And I feel like we have this like false narrative that we're meant to be okay, and things are meant to be like, yeah, good, okay. And it's like they are okay because we can be with anything, but it doesn't have to be good. Like we can be just okay in the grief. Yeah, like it's hard, and I'm having a really hard time at the moment. But that in itself is okay, because that's part of the cycle. And I feel like that's something that I just really want to keep reminding us, especially because there's been so much new age spirituality that's filtered through into these worlds where, we all create our reality. And I'm like, do we really? Like, yes, there's aspects that we can tend to if we do practices that tend to our energy and our frequency, and then that does like open up certain spaces. But if it doesn't work for everyone, then I don't believe it. And so this idea that we create our own reality, and it's like, did 10,000 people in LA just wake up and be like, I want my home to burn down today? That's the reality that I'm creating. Like, of course they didn't. And, do people in Gaza have like an inner desire for war? And I feel like it's really dangerous, like that we get into this place where it's like, yes, what we do and what we feel on the inner really makes sense. And there's always an invitation to just deepen into compassion and love, and this loose resilience. Like it's a really beautiful, I can't explain it necessarily with words, but I can feel it. And it's not like resilience. It's just like resilience. Like yes, I'm here. And that's so different from self-blame and community blame, really just like living in all of these projections when we're actually just going through like a really, really, really intense time on planet Earth, and a time that many of the indigenous call a time of purification. That's like the invitation to be in that space of purification, whatever that means. And for me, what that means is letting go of my resistance to things I thought, were going to happen, or were meant to be, or were is how it's supposed to be, and actually just being with how it is. And knowing that we can still dream into that. It's not like we have no power in it at all, because we do. We have that power to stay open and to stay in the possibilities. But we have to face what's actually in front of us and know that we can do it.
Yeah, I think that's the resiliency part that you're talking about, right? It's the, I can do this, not like, "Roar, I can't do this. I'm going to punch a wall through and do my thing." But like, that confidence of, I can do this. You know, when you were speaking the whole time, I was thinking of my daughter who's 9 this year. You know, in her world, it's school, classmates, but those are like friends, you know, those are the big things that are happening in her life. She'll sometimes ask, you know, tell me a story and then say like, "Was that good?" I'm like, "Well, it's not about being good or bad. It's how do you want to feel in that situation? How do you want your friends to feel? And what control do you have over that? If you can't control it, what can you control then?" And getting her to start thinking about that resiliency piece, right? It's about, okay, I can be in that grief. I can be sad, but that is okay, because then I also will then know what it will feel like on that opposite end, right? If you're in that grief, you can also be in that love and know how that feels. Without knowing the one side of it, how would you then know the other side, is kind of how I explain it to her. And I've now seen, like, over the years, I've been saying bits of this over the years to her, and you know, I can see now sometimes she'll be like, "Oh, this kid is so annoying." You know, they're talking in class and I can't concentrate on my work. And I'm like, "But what can you control?" And now, you know, she comes home from school and sometimes still vent about that, but being able to not look for my advice, but just wanting to share and then say, "Yeah, but you know what? I joined choir and I have choir practice, so school will be okay today." Even though, you know, there's the annoying kids. So it's trying to build up that confidence. No matter how old you are, what age you're in, what your troubles are, it's building up that confidence of knowing, okay, I am okay, or I will be okay. Just what is the feeling that I can control in this moment?
I think that's beautiful to hear these kind of stories from children, because sometimes the more I grow older, the more I realize, oh, I'm starting to think so much more than before. But children also still have so much like in their minds going on. When I was a child, I wonder if I had all these, maybe I don't know if we can call them worries, but in a way like things going on, like, is this a good story or is this a bad story? Like thinking about what is interesting and not, because if I think about my own journey, I had a lot of struggles with what is it that is interesting to say, like what is interesting to other people. If I share something, I quite held myself back a lot of the times, because in spaces with a lot of people, I felt like I have so much to share, but is this really what others want to hear? But I was like, now, no, like just share because it's yours, and maybe someone else wants to hear it. Maybe they kind of have something else that they want to bring, yeah, as well. Yeah, so if I think about children in my life and the way they are as well, it brings me back also to this playfulness and what is it that they bring to this world and what we can learn from them.
Just thinking back to what you said, Lise, about, you know, when we're younger, we're always thinking about, oh, is this interesting to say? And that kind of brought me to like the digital world that we're in. People are like, oh, I have to make things interesting in order to post or whatnot. And the question shouldn't be, is this interesting to say? Whether you're posting or whether you're speaking to someone, whether you're having an online chat or what have you. But the question might be maybe not a question, but just more of a thinking statement of, it doesn't matter if it's interesting to say, but you have something important to say. So you should say it. And I wonder if people get out of that mindset of, yeah, is this interesting? To wait, no, this is important. Then your more true voice can come out.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're also in this time of post-truth and a lot of people saying what they feel they have to say and it actually being quite violent out there.
With compassion. So what you have to say is important, but with compassion.
Actually, there's a huge piece around judgment. And first, that's the judgment of ourselves and what both of you are talking about with that confidence and that permission to share and to not judge how others are going to receive it, but actually come from that place of your own expression. And also to share about things in a way that isn't judging of others and where that's coming from. But it's tricky because I already did it by judging New Age spirituality. And so it's really hard, isn't it? As we're trying to unpick and unhook things. And for me, come at reality from a decolonial kind of post New Age place where we understand that we can, clear trauma and change the experience that we're having. That's what I do with clients and in my one-to-one and mentorship. We do that work and it's beautiful work and it really does have an impact and it really does either open the space for someone to feel free to share their voice and not be scared of what they have to say. Or I was working with someone recently around relationships and all of the blocks that they were having around controlling those relationships and not being able to fully open into them, and then actually having an experience that's quite different from us going through and opening those places. And so it's completely possible that we can change what we experience on some level, but we're all still met by these huge collective cycles and these huge things that are out of our control and that are bigger than us and that are kind of this time. What you were alluding to, Mary, at the beginning was we're at the start of a new political cycle, a new president, and what are the implications of that for the next 4 years for the whole world? None of us know yet. There's a lot of different ideas of what that's going to be. Some people that are over the moon and feel like we're all going to be free and the world's going to be amazing and without chemicals, and others that feel like this means that the world's going to be a horrific place in 4 years' time, and we don't actually know. And so we're being asked to work with this quite interesting balance of being open and then being committed really to our own integrity, both energetic and whatever those values are that we have. That does sometimes mean you have to fight for things and you have to stand up against things, and sometimes it does require that fierceness. But I feel it's about not being afraid of all of that, because this is where we are. And we are going to witness more and more disasters, climate disasters, systemic disasters, however you frame it. There's only going to be more flooding and fires. And as we know, most of us have governments that are struggling to provide services as things are, let alone manage in big disasters. As we're feeling more squeezed in lots of ways, we're also being asked to be more creative, and there's a lot of pressure that's there. How do we protect that sense of possibility and creativity in us that allows us to find ways to navigate these times?
Yeah, I think that really speaks to me when you say about the possibility, and how, if I speak for myself and maybe the people from my generation, I feel like a lot of pressure is put on my shoulders, or I also put it on my shoulders myself, but that I need to know what I want to do and what is it that I'm here for on this earth. And when I put so much thought to it, or pressure it so much, I think then I don't see the possibilities that are surrounding me, and I feel kind of stuck, which is not what is needed from me right now as well. It's like, in a way, it's like a surrendering into the unknown and knowing that whatever actions I take now will ripple out and kind of sow seeds for what it is in the future that wants to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. We can get completely overwhelmed in the enormity, even if we take this very current reality in the world that there's people returning to where their homes were in LA and needing to figure out how to rebuild their lives, and there's people returning to places in Gaza and finding that there's nothing left there apart from rubble, and then it can feel like I want to help everybody find a home. Like, how can I want to help everyone rebuild their lives, and pouring whatever resource, time, support, money, whatever we have into like one person being able to do that is kind of how we do it. Like, noticing what we can do in and around wherever we are, in the place that we find ourselves and what's around us. And then if we have resources to reach internationally into other places as well, and then not allowing for that overwhelm, because there's action, because energy's moving, because we are allowing ourselves to be part of the creative flow. The worst thing is when we get frozen and we're no longer in that creativity. Thank you for listening. If you are enjoying this episode, please do get more involved. You can do this by joining our membership, Presence Collective, where we explore deeper how to create beauty in the mess. And you can find details of our experiences such as Reclaim Your Intuition, beautiful leadership mentoring, and our in-person retreats. By joining in and being an active member of this community, you support the making of this show, keeping the episodes full length, free and accessible for all, so we can stay advertising free in a world that is always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. Other ways that you can connect into the ecosystem is by sharing these episodes with those in your life and dropping us a note from time to time. Head to allthatweare.org to get involved. I wonder if either of you have any either whole episodes or specific like wisdom, something that's really stuck with you from different episodes that you want to share and remind our beautiful friends that are listening of.
I really like the timeless ones that we're doing, just because then it does trigger back to my, oh yeah, I should go back and listen to that one, or expand on that and like listen to or read their other works and things like that. So we recently had a timeless on Johann Hari, and I was like, oh yeah, that episode. And why haven't I read his books yet? So I got some of his audiobooks and have been listening to that and just revisiting those ideas, which are still very valid and current right now, about societal issues and the food that we eat. Lee's here talking about food and nourishment. And, he's got so many different books on topics that relate to society as a whole that I find very intriguing right now. I'm like listening to his book Magic Pill right now on how did society come to the way it has, based on the foods we eat and how we want to look a certain way. And it's fascinating to get to that point where it all began from the podcast and listening to, him on the show. And like all these timeless episodes, I really like how they're making me rethink about some of the topics that has been explored in the past. But the Johann Hari one was the one that was more very recent to me as I'm going through the audiobook right now.
I think when I was listening or revisiting what we have been working on, I felt like, oh, there's so many episodes that are like my favorites. But then I was looking through my notebook, and all of a sudden yesterday I saw this page of where I was writing about the one with Amanda Scott. And I felt like, oh, that seemed to really have landed with me, how she mentioned to live more from the heart mind and to be like gratefulness, compassion, and this joyful curiosity. And I remember that I was like, yeah, at that moment, feeling a bit like, oh, I feel like maybe I've lost this joyful curiosity within myself. And to have these timeless wisdom from people that I have never heard about at first really made me like, oh, like remembering that let's live from this place, from the heart, and be like, in a way, like a child and joyful and curious. What is it surrounding me? And I wrote a lot of others down that I feel like are my favorites. The first one that I was working on was the one with Darren LeBaron. I remember listening to him and I'm feeling very inspired because of his energy and the way he talks, and everything he shares about mushrooms was so like, oh, mind blown, the way his mind works, like in a way like a network of all these mycelium working together. I was very inspired by the way he shared about his passion. And when someone does that with their whole heart, like Manda shared, I feel it very much within me. And I think that I had that same feeling with the last one, the timeless episode with Lucille, where she really shared from her own perspective, like her journey that she has been on with creating this vision for the restaurant in LA. And I could feel how her passion came alive within me. And I almost felt like, yeah, I also want to to have my own restaurant in a way. So it brought me this like a sense of engagement, and that's what I like when I listen to podcasts. And the same feel, yeah, I feel like I have many, but the same feeling I had when I listened to you speaking about the episode, like tending to the heart, and I feel that one also really spoke to me because the way that ritual has a place in my life, and fire and tending to the fire has been much more relevant the past year in my life. And I think I could really feel how this episode came from a place deep within yourself. And I remember that then I could also kind of create and write more from that place. So there are many, many episodes I feel that were interesting to me, but these are a few that come up now.
Yeah, well, we rarely have a dud episode on All That We Are. Jaya John is one of the ones of the last series that's really, yeah, a lot of people have mentioned it to me, that one, that they were really, really moved by it. And he is really embodying something really beautiful and really important, I feel, for these times. Do either of you have a question that you would like to ask me?
Yeah, I was wondering, because sometimes I know my intuition is always there, but sometimes I feel like I lose it kind of. And I wonder, in times where you feel like maybe a bit disconnected from yourself or from your intuition, how you come back and what kind of practices that you feel like you tune in. And maybe when I'm, for example, sometimes I second guess my intuition, like for when I'm cooking, there's a lot of intuitive practices while cooking to tune in like daily with your intuition, in which way that happens for you.
There's so many ways, and I feel like that's the whole thing about intuition. It's so individual, and it's about learning our own language with that aspect of our intelligence, and it only really works when we figure out our own way of doing it. And that's why, like, in my book there's so many practices, because I feel like there's so many different doorways into it. What I do know is that the less noise there is in our minds, the less I think, I'm wondering, here, I'm there, I should, all of this, like when we can kind of come out of that, which is about confidence and also about letting go of fear, and come into that place where we're just being and we're just trusting ourselves that whatever we are in that moment is enough and it's beautiful. And like when you're cooking and you're not really scrutinizing every bit of it, you're in a flow, and you're in a flow with it, and then something beautiful comes out. Cooking's a really funny one for me because it's really where how I'm feeling shows up. I can make the same dish. Sometimes it's amazing and sometimes it's awful. And it's often awful when I'm cooking for somebody like that I know is going to be mean about it, or like there's kind of, something, or I'm feeling really stressed about something else and there's something else that's taking up my inner space, and then it all kind of goes wrong in the kitchen. And and then I'm like, but I've made this dish so many times. How can that happen? Yeah, there's not a lot of rewriting on all of this. Like it is the things that work are meditation, moving our bodies, connecting to the divine in some way. For me, chanting is really beautiful. And making sure there's some movement, whether it's often yoga and dance. I'm a big fan of dancing to 3 songs every day at least. And at the moment, I just love going to the gym, which is a new thing. It's really fun. And it's kind of nice to kind of activate that strength. And writing is really powerful for so many people. But there's so much more. Rituals as well are such a beautiful part of it. And for anyone listening that wants like a really nice guide through this, I have Reclaim Your Intuition, which is a whole journey, and it has rituals and it has games and it has trust tools, it has contemplations. It really it's a very embodied adventure into creating that trust. And there's also a part of it that's about really tending to those voices of what's in the way and our conditioning, and knowing that we've all been conditioned in certain ways, and a lot of the ways that we've been conditioned are away from trusting ourselves. And that's part of that work, is around understanding what those stories are that we're living with and shifting them, which there are many ways to shift them. For me, I find that the most powerful ways are in the subconscious and shifting them energetically, because so much of it is unconscious that comes through. Yeah, I mean, this is it's a big question, isn't it? But I feel like the more that we can get into our bodies and out of our heads, the more that we can come into a more cohesive experience of ourselves. Also, a relaxedness, kind of what I was talking about with resilience. I'm really into this year being more relaxed in our power. That's maybe a nice invitation for everyone listening. How can it be this gentle, relaxed embodiedness that is resilient, that is strong, that is trusting, that is confident? And instead of it being like a kind of whipping, it being a gentler, softer invitation and experience with ourselves and each other.
Yeah, my question was around intuition as well. It being, at the start of the year and all of that. Every year, I like to review and go through what was my word of the year last year, what were my phrases that I was honing in on last year. And for the past 2 years, I've used intuition as one of my top words. But every year, I feel like, I'm like, is it intuition again? But what does it mean for me this year? And like you were saying, it's going to be different for everyone. So, and you touched on a couple things in answering Lee's question, but I think I want you to paint more of a picture and be maybe a bit more specific about how you see intuition being different this year. How is it shifting?
I love that question. That intuition itself is an evolving collective force.
Mhm.
Of course, consciousness is always shifting and there is more of an invitation. When I started doing this work, it was like such a kind of whipping, like, okay, I'm going to sit for 20 minutes and do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this breath work, and then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it was so intense, but it was also of that time because there was a density around all of this. And of course, I've now been doing all this for many, many years. So there's that. But I also feel like when people come to it, there's more openness. We're more porous and we're more aware and believing. And there isn't that thing that, especially in London, let me tell you, like 10 and 15 years ago, like everyone thought you were off your rocket. Like there was a real not wanting to open. And I feel like now we really understand that intuition is a real thing and it's part of our intelligence and it's part of who we are. And I don't feel like it is this witchy thing that has to be like a whole thing. Like it's just part of all of us. And that's the really sad thing. Like we have to reclaim it because we weren't taught how to use it. It feels like in the collective field, there's now so much permission. And the obstacles are also great. Like I feel like things get easier on one hand and more open and more accepted. And consciousness is more like malleable and we are experiencing more on those planes. And then at the same time, there's so much misinformation, conflicting information, different understandings of reality that it's like more and more important to be able to find that place within ourselves. You know, we often defer to the community for that part of our intuition. Okay, what is everyone else doing about this? Or what is everyone else feeling? What's everyone else saying about it? And actually, I've experienced it quite a lot where people that are even like really, really popular, like really well known and are making a lot of waves with a particular narrative or saying something. And some of them have even been on this podcast. And I get a little like, ooh, like I don't fully feel this. There's stuff that's really beautiful about it. And there's stuff that also isn't like all knowing. And again, I feel like it comes into that space of certainty. There's so many different pathways and there's so much that's possible. Part of what we're being asked to do with our intuition this year is be more flexible and less controlling in that way. If our intuition is saying it's this or it's this, you know, what's the right answer? You know, often we can get into that thing of what do I need to do? What's the right thing to do? Like, and what happens if we just allow it all to be a little bit more open and a little bit more relaxed and really fight this culture that is the expert in this and this is the only way to heal your gut. You have to do this protocol. And then someone else comes on and says, you have to just do this protocol. And then, you know, they write 5 books each on their protocols and comes with a whole special branded blender or like a special supplement or whatever. It's like all this like intense certainty. And the reality is that anyone that does like any of those things, like for a really long time, meets the shadows of it. Whether it's a really committed asana practice of a certain type of yoga, you meet those people 10, 15 years down the line and they're like, oh, wow, my hamstrings are just so tight because I did it like this every day. And the same with fasting, like these things can be amazing, but it's really like we're in a constant change and flux. And so we need to meet life in that place of discipline and like commitment, but also openness and trusting that things change and they change quite often because something else happens in that collective field or there's a new bit of information or we open and discover another part of ourselves. And so even something that we felt really certain about like might not there's like an opening, and it's not about being one of those really annoying people that like can't make any commitments because you have to see how you feel in like every moment. Like, we have to live and honor ourselves and each other and creativity and doing things which involves making a commitment. Like, I didn't feel like doing this at this moment in time, but this was the time that the three of us had that we could come together, and it's beautiful. And so we show up, right? So there's just so much nuance. And I feel like that's what our intuition is inviting us to dance with at this time, is like more of the nuance, more of the holding lightly, more of the being open to new information, less of the yes and the no and the right and the wrong. And also that this could be really a time where we can really like step into that part of ourselves and do it quite quickly as well. Like if it's something that there's a struggle with or a resistance to, that actually there is a real openness as well that we can tap into, of just, letting go of, I'm not going to doubt myself anymore. What does it even mean to get it wrong? Like, we just need to learn from everything we do. We collect more information. Our intuition is not necessarily always going to guide us on like the most perfectly easy route either, because we're here to learn and grow, to expand and contract, to die and be reborn, and all of it. And that's a process.
Yeah, it's not very black and white, good or
Yeah.
bad. Which I feel like, society is like, it's one way, let's do it this way, and then everything will be better. You're like, well, what about this and what about that? So I like that idea of like dancing in the in between, the gray space.
It's also all gray space, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Nobody really has the answer to anything. We're all doing this as a grand experiment. I was telling that to my daughter the other day. I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing. You are the only child I've ever had, so let's just play it out and see what happens. But we're doing this with the best intention and the best decision making in the time that we have and the information that we've gathered. So let's go. And then if we need to shift again, we'll shift again.
Yeah, and that in itself is a skill, right? To be able to acknowledge like our imperfection and then let it go and be imperfect again in a different way. Yeah.
Yeah, there's different levels of that. Like I feel like I can do that with my daughter now. Like we've gotten to a very safe space where we're very open with each other, but then I clam up when I think, oh, I'm in a professional setting. I need to act a certain way or say a certain thing. And so, yeah, it's not black or white. It changes with the situations that we're in too.
And I wonder if we can go a bit easier on each other as well this year in the spiritual, personal development worlds. It can get so intense with like, you trigger me and you're this diagnosis and you need to take accountability for this. And of course, like sometimes we need to have conversations with each other about ways that we're bumping up against each other. And sometimes we do need to like, it is serious and there does need to be some kind of accountability, but just like putting stuff on people is also one of the horrible things about this whole self-improvement movement. It doesn't really allow for the compassion of just how people behave when they're not in a good place, that maybe then they don't have the same awareness that, because they're not in a good place. And I feel like that compassion really is needed in these times, because I don't know about you, but I do know a lot of people that are struggling, and the statistics show that there's people struggling in all kinds of ways. And those are just people that we know that are putting on brave faces. Yeah, there's that thing, isn't there, of don't take things personally. Maybe that's also one of the biggest blockers to our intuition. And by intuition, I also mean that like creative flow space, that when we let ourselves get full of taking things personally, whether it's relational or societal, it ends up making it harder to act with that clarity and integrity and love and grace.
Yeah, I think I noticed that when I'm cooking for other people here in community, that sometimes I'm like already judging my own food before it's even put on the table. And that I put on so many like stories that this and I think this, but then in the end they just enjoy it. But to tell these stories to yourself makes it so like taking everything personal. Like if someone doesn't take this food, maybe it's because I made it that way, or shows how creating a story around it and taking it personal also has an effect on how the way I'm eating the food that I made with love in the end.
And actually, someone might just not have liked that vegetable ever in their life and always leave
Yeah.
that bit on every
Yeah.
meal that they've ever had in their entire life.
Yeah. I'm like beetroots, but maybe and then I'm like, of course, I also didn't like beetroots when I was a few years ago, and now I'm like making a beetroot like a spread, and I'm like, of course, some people don't like it. You don't need to take this personal.
Yeah, but that is a really beautiful reminder of, in the simple thing of how just like you're doing something really beautiful, you're creating a meal, but then to go into a space where then there's a whole story around how it's received when really we have no idea how it's received. And it doesn't matter because the thing that matters is that you created it with the love and the care. Yeah, I feel like I've had a couple of really big ones of these in the last few years because I also feel like as people are struggling, and I've been holding a lot the last years, it can create even more reactivity and even more sense of being over capacity or whatever it's framed as. But actually, if we all just like take some deep breaths and like make eye contact, it's fine. It's all fine. And we don't need to create these stories and then live in these stories and then feel like this shame and hurt and all of it. And so I feel like that's definitely something that I really want to tend to this year, is being really aware of those kind of things and reacting with more compassion for myself and for everyone. Do either of you have a call to action or something that you want to close our time here with?
My call to action is just to remind everyone to breathe because I forget to breathe. So having that space to just be like, and then answer what you need to answer or say what you need to say, to take that time and not to be afraid of the silence. I think a lot of people in our digital age again, like we're always filling up that time with our phones or saying something, but I think filling up that space with some silence or breathing, even if it's just a quick whew, and then I'll move on with what I need to move on with, I think changes the game, at least for me.
My call to action is just to go outside and enjoy the beauty that's surrounding you.
Thank you so much, Mary and Lise. Real joy to weave with you through all that we are and to spend this time. And I hope that all of you listening have enjoyed getting to know these fantastic women and getting a little behind the scenes into who makes this and how it's made, and knowing that each episode is made in a really loving and tender way between the three of us. Each episode is listened to in 3 different countries, and we share and we edit and we create the imagery, the words, everything of how we share it. And it's a really beautiful process over a week between the three of us. And please do, as always, get in touch and share some of the things that have moved you about the podcast. Share them on your socials, and even better than that, tell your friends, tell the people in your life about episodes that have been important for you. Let's keep tending to this movement of all of these incredible wisdom carriers, of which you listening are one. Let's tend to this sharing of wisdom in these powerful times. Thank you for listening. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode and it has sparked some inspiration and creativity in you. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, join our experiences, and discover so much more over on allthatweare.org. We give space to our guests to share their perspective without debating it or fact-checking, as this approach allows for deep, unedited conversations from the heart. We trust your discernment and wisdom to take what is useful and challenge what isn't in your own understanding. We offer spaces for discussion and integration in our membership community, which we would love for you to join. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast. And so it's made possible with you, our beautiful community. If you loved this and would like to connect more deeply with us, please join our membership, retreats, and experiences. Share the episode with your friends and do drop us a note from time to time. Please hit subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen so that others can find us. This podcast is made by an all-female global team. All That We Are celebrates all that we are already and the untapped potential that lives inside us. It invites the full power of the more than human world, nature, the unseen, our ancestors, and our future generations. It reminds us that we never exist in silos through borders, timelines, or polarity. That in each and every moment, all that we are is here.